Okay, part two. Couldn't finish that up. Kind of leaving you hanging. So let's clean things up a little bit and give you a few things to think about. Maybe explain things a little bit better. Okay, so I was just talking about how to think about roots that they can be written as fractional exponents, and maybe that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like, what would be a number to the 1/3 power? Well, it just means that it's to the cubed root. So here's the way that these things get written. If we've got x to some power, maybe you even rewrite a number as a base to a power, like 8 could be written as 2 cubed. And then over here you've got what's called either the index or the root. Let's just talk about the root right now. Get rid of that. Then you could rewrite that as x to that power, taken also to that root. And then they're put together in one fraction. So for instance here, I've got, if I had 8 squared, I have like 64. I want to write it as 8 squared. And then I'm taking the cubed root of that. Operations don't matter. You can do one before the other. You could take the cubed root of 8 and then square it, or you could square 8 and then take the cubed root. Sometimes there's a math of least resistance there that you want to take. But the point here is that you can rewrite that, and you take that power, the 2, and you put it in the numerator of the fractional exponent. And you take that root or index there, the 3, and you put it in the denominator. And so you can try that on your calculator. Again, it's kind of hard to think of what 8 to the 2/3 would be, but it would be less than 8, right? So you can go 8, and then you can use your caret button. And if you want a fraction, you can go alpha x. I kind of like that. It's a cool little shortcut that I just discovered recently. And you can go 2, use your arrows to go down, and type in the 3, and then make a guess. Make a guess. What do you think 8 to the 2/3 power is? It's 4. It's 4. 4. No, what's 64? What's the cube root of 64? Well, 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. Or what's the cubed root of 8? 2. And then what's 2 squared? That's 4. The reason for that is, well, I'll take this 8 to the 2/3 business here. That could also be written as 8 squared times 1/3. 2/3 is 2 times 1/3, right? So there's the squared part, and there's your cubed root. I could rewrite that because it's just multiplication. I could write it the other way. I could take the cubed root and then I could square it. So it's the same thing. Since they're on the same level of order of operations, we can interchange those things. If that still doesn't make sense, just know that your calculator can do these things. Let me point out to you where you can push the buttons on your calculator to get that. The root symbols to come up. I already showed you the caret and the fraction buttons. But if you use your alpha, and then you press the button for window, window is up here at the top. If you notice that the alpha button is green, and that allows you to get to any function that's green anywhere else on the calculator. So if you go alpha and you press the window button, you're actually accessing what's called the F2 function button. And you get this menu that pops up of all these different choices that you've got for doing stuff. If you look down at number 6, it is x. It's got an x in the index position or the root position, and then the square root button, the radical sign. And then this kind of thing here will pop up, and you can type in any number that you want to in there for the index or the root. So if I was going to follow what we just did there, I'd put a 3, and I could put an 8 underneath it to the power of 2. I could rewrite it like this, and then see what happens there when I hit enter, and I get the same answer. So those are equivalent expressions there. Another way you can do it, find on your calculator, is go over here to math. I like that button. It just is asking to be pushed, right? Go to math, and in that first drop down menu that comes, you can see there number 5 and number 4. 4 is if you just want a cubed root. I'll print that out for you. And number 5 will do the same thing you can do using that alpha F2 button. it'll bring up a thing where you can type in your root, and you can put stuff underneath the radical sign there too. That is one part of your education here, is knowing how to use the tool right. Right? If I give you a hammer, I want to say hammers are only for this. Okay? So there you go. There's that. All right, so I can take, and let me show you one more thing about these powers things and why this fractional exponent thing works the way it does. If I had it where I was writing it already so that the root and the power already match, well, that would be just me writing this as, well, the power goes up here and the root goes down here. And 3 divided by 3 is 1. So this would be the same thing as figuring out what is 8 to the 1 power. And 8 to the 1 power is 8. Okay, doesn't that make sense? If you cubed 8 and then you took the cubed root of 8, you get back to 8. So that equals 8 to the 1, or just straight up 8. Okay, so that's pretty clever how that works. Couple of sample problems here, and then one geometry type of problem. These are straight out of your book, straight out of Compton. 216 to the 1/3 power is the same thing as the cubed root of 216. And if you've done that thing in the back of your notebook yet, if you haven't, you should. 216 is the same thing as 6 cubed. Okay, so if you went 6 cubed, you take the square root, you're going to get 6. Now you can type that in your calculator and it'll give you the right answer. And that would probably be good practice to learn how to push the right buttons. But it would give you 6. Now here's a conundrum here though, because we already talked about negatives and how they kind of mess things up, especially with squares, but with cubes and cubed roots, think about this. Negative times a negative times a negative is, it's another negative. So you can have a cubed root of a negative number because there is a number that if you multiply by itself 3 times, you will get a negative number. So it's only when the root is even where we're going to have a problem taking the square root of a negative number, or taking a root of a negative number. This one here, we got to think, what times itself 3 times would equal negative 27? Well, 27 is 3 times 3 times 3. So negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3 would give you negative 27. You can try that on your calculator as long as you leave this in parentheses. If you leave that parentheses off, it will treat that negative sign differently, but if you put it in parentheses, it will know exactly what to do. So you got to put your thinking cap on a little bit, and you have to start getting used to seeing 64 and thinking about what that breaks down into if you were to do factorization on it. Powers of 2 and 3 and 4, getting used to seeing those numbers and knowing what they're also, how else you could write them. That's a really handy skill to have in math, is to see a number like 46 and automatically go, well, that's 2 times 23. Everybody knows that. That is not a perfect square. It's close to 49, which is 7 squared. So if I took the square root of 46, it should be 6 point something. That's a good skill to have. Okay, I've used too much of your time already. I got to make another video. Oh, there's that problem up there. How would you solve that? Think about that for a minute. And then you can check that one out in your book. But basically what we're doing is we want to say, if the total volume of this cube is 3,375 cubic meters, what would be the length of one side? How would we go about solving that problem? I'll give you a hint. It has something to do with what we talked about. All right. We'll talk to you later. Well, I mean, metaphorically speaking.